I am a sleep scientist, and I have to spend the night alone in the sleep lab. I have performed this overnight vigil hundreds of times before. I'm comfortable with the sleep lab. It's like a second home to me. I think I spend more nights here than I do in my own bed. The room is dark. It has to be, of course, so that no light goes into the sleep room next door. And I stare at the flickering screen in front of me. The lab computer records and monitors patients' brain activity, EEG brain waves. You know, those never-ending wiggly lines dancing across the screen. First, I think I need to explain what the sleep lab is exactly. The room I am in right now is known as the monitoring room. It is next door to the sleep rooms. There is a window installed into the wall of the monitoring room, which allows us to look directly into the sleep room without having to go in. The good thing is that my main job through the night, usually, is simply to stay awake and keep an eye on things. Monitor the patients and their brainwave activity on screen. Make sure everything is ticking along as it should be. There are infrared cameras mounted on the sleep room walls, so I can see the patient on another monitor, make sure everything's okay. I have to make sure the brainwave recording is going well, that the recording wires are still attached to the patient's scalps, and that the recording is free from noise and interference. Through all this, the main job is usually just staying awake and alert. To keep myself awake, I'm allowed to browse the internet on my laptop, as long as the speakers are switched off, of course, and on the condition that I keep a vigilant eye on the patients and their signals. Later on comes the mentally taxing part of analyzing that data, but overnight I don't have to worry about that yet. Sometimes, watching the EEG brainwaves flit continuously across the screen can be strangely hypnotic, and I have to fight to keep myself awake. Tonight, though, is different. Tonight, there's no danger of me nodding off. I'm wide awake, and I'm terrified. There is only one patient in the sleep lab tonight. He's in coma, so I'm practically alone in the building. There's no one who I can go to, no one to wake up. That's what makes tonight even more unnerving. Normally I would never wake up a patient, unless protocol requires it, but these aren't normal circumstances. If there was someone else around, sometimes I monitor multiple patients at once, I would have awoken them by now. Not to adjust their wires, not to give them their meds, not to check up on them, simply because I need someone here with me because things are getting out of control. Anyhow, he's the only one here, and he's in a coma. So I could scream and shout all I want, he won't stir. All I have is an unconscious body for company. It's why I've come here, to reach out to you. Normally, I like the darkness of the sleep lab. It's comforting, it's what I'm used to. So tonight, even though I could have turned on the lights at the beginning of the night, if I wanted to, the patient wouldn't have woken up, even if I were to shine a flashlight with the brightness of 1,000 suns straight into their eyes. Instead, I just sat here quite comfortably in the dark. It's a matter of habit, I suppose. Let me get one thing clear. I have seen all manner of things during my time working here. A mixture of scary and panic-inducing. I'm a neuroscientist specializing in sleep research, and my professional interest lies in characterizing and trying to find new treatments for sleep disorders. I've had multiple patients with sleep paralysis who wake in hysterics, telling me about the demons that tried to kill them, draw them out on paper to show me, diagrams of the horrible faces that haunt them in the night. They point out frantically and urgently where the demons had stood in the room. I've had countless children in who have woken up screaming, blood-curdling screams, the kind of sound that makes your hair stand on end, suffering from night terrors. I've had people sleepwalking, throwing things around. Sometimes they've even managed to rip the wires off their head, which is very painful because they are glued on, and still not woken up. One man, still unconscious, cut his own wrists with a shaving razor. I slept through it, even as I bandaged him up and phoned for help. I've had patients stop breathing suddenly, mid-dream, and I've had to rush in and perform CPR. Sometimes, some people somehow manage to open the door of the sleep room, wander through the corridor and come into the monitor room. Some of them trying to attack me, hit me, bite me, while they're asleep. What I'm saying is, I've seen a lot. I've had to remain level-headed throughout it all, and focus on the job. They rip their wires out, I need to put them back on and make sure the EEG recording stays online. They start sleepwalking, I can't wake them up, I need to make sure their wires are still in place, that we're getting a good signal, and that the infrared camera is capturing everything so that we can analyze the data. Usually I just need to make sure they're confined to the sleep room and can't hurt themselves, or me. Child screaming? No big deal. It can be a little creepy at first, but I've seen it 1,000 times before. Just make sure the signal is okay, make a note of the time and duration of the night terror, and then it's carry on as usual. I need to be focused and to concentrate on the central aim, ensuring that patient data collection continues uninterrupted, and keeping a corresponding meticulous written record of any unusual events. After all, that's why they're there, these patients, so we can diagnose them, so that we can get them the treatment and medication they need to get on with their lives, so we can help them break out of the bubble of terror that engulfs them every night, created by their minds. When it goes awry, the slumbering brain can be an evil, self-destructive thing. My job is to help rein it in. I'm actually used to this routine, these strange, tumultuous nights, more so than a lot of my colleagues. You see, I became a sleep neuroscientist because of my older brother. I can't remember when it started, but I remember I would wake up regularly to hear him muttering and talking in his sleep. Sometimes he would sit upright and scream. Other times he would whimper, his voice coming out whiny and afraid. It was the whimpering that scared me more than the screaming, for some reason. During the day, he was my big brother. We'd play basketball together, and he'd buy me popsicles from the ice cream truck with his pocket money, help me cross the road and tie my shoes. He's only a couple of years older than me, but 2 years can be a huge gulf during childhood. He was my hero. But at night, he became this frightened little boy who lashed out at me when I tried to wake him up. As the days went by, though, I became used to it. When we got older, he didn't grow out of it, as most children do. It got worse. He started experiencing a jumble of symptoms: night terrors, sleep paralysis, sleepwalking, and also what I know now is REM disorder. It didn't get better. Then, his visions and hallucinations began to seep into the daytime. What beasts and terrors had been confined to his dreamscapes now haunted him during wakefulness as well. He was diagnosed with sleep disorders, combined with schizophrenia. I wanted to help him. It took a toll on every part of his life. He was more intelligent than me, with a potential bright future ahead. But he fell behind in his studies, unable to concentrate. I started to study the brain for him, because I wanted to understand what was happening inside his mind. So I began on my quest to study the brain, to unlock its secrets, because I wanted to help him, and others like him, to escape. I wanted him to return to being himself. My brother, unfortunately, never really improved. No amount of drugs could help him. And he insisted that this was because his visions weren't due to a disorder. They were real. He would often shout and scream that drugs couldn't take something away if it were real. As I progressed in my scientific studies, which I had embarked upon for the very reason to help him, ironically, it caused a rift between us. I thought he would be proud when I got my PhD. But he almost saw my scientific endeavors as a betrayal, as a sign that I didn't believe him. I guess the fact that I'm his younger brother doesn't help much. It doesn't matter how many qualifications I attain, how many scientific publications I write, how respected I am amongst my academic peers. My brother will never listen to me, and he refuses to set foot in my lab or try any of the treatments I recommended. We haven't spoken in years. However, what I'm about to narrate, what I've been through tonight, isn't about my brother. A few days ago, we had a very perplexing case come into the sleep lab. The patient is a man in his mid-20s who had lapsed into an atypical coma a few days before he was transferred to our facility. The patient's older brother accompanied him and sat in the sleep room on a chair next to his bed, concerned, holding his hand. I'll admit, one of the reasons I took such an interest in the case is because it struck a personal chord with me. It reminded me of my brother and I. Some of my colleagues were hesitant to take on this patient for observation. The reason is that this patient presents with a whole list of strange and unusual symptoms. The patient's brother reports that the patient had a slight head trauma a few days before he went into the coma. Not substantial enough to cause significant head injury, but it probably did contribute to his symptoms, we thought. His brother later tells us that the patient actually documented the hours prior to his succumbing to the coma. He was suffering from extreme delusion and hallucinations. The patient's leg is what should, in theory, provide a diagnostic clue. When I was placing wires on the patient, we have to place sensors around the chest, abdomen and legs to monitor breathing patterns and leg movements. The patient's left leg is something that truly shocked me. It seemed necrotic. I've never seen anything quite like it. The team from pathology have taken several biopsies and sent these for analysis at the top medical centers and specialist laboratories around the world. Endocrinologists have been consulted in case it's a freak hormonal disorder. Dermatologists have examined him in case it's an infection or some strange injury or burn on his skin. Experts in tropical diseases have flown over to investigate in case it's a poison from a bite or something similarly obscure. We have been thorough, and every avenue has been looked into. His blood work, pathology report, everything is coming out clean. Whatever this is, we don't have an answer. We don't have this disease categorized yet. We don't have the tools to detect it because we don't know what it is. The professor in charge of our lab has a theory that the patient may have been exposed to some airborne pathogen which infected his peripheral and central nervous system. The symptoms in his leg are spreading slowly, most likely through his nerves. It may explain the unusual brain activity we're picking up on, if it has infected his brain, too. What's strange is, his brainwaves aren't typical of a coma patient, but all his other physical attributes are. His pupils are unresponsive to light, and he is unresponsive to all stimuli applied, including painful stimuli, except for reflex responses. He is a medical mystery, and he's causing a sensation around the world in medical and scientific circles. He may hold the key to some obscure disease, and by extension, a new discovery. We're looking at uncharted ground here. But right now, he's here, alone in the lab, with only me to monitor him and track his brain activity. Some people are unsure if whatever disease he has is contagious, but we don't think so. Nonetheless, I took one look at his brother, holding his hand and looking forlorn and desperate, and I knew I just had to help, in whatever way I could. So, this afternoon, one by one, my colleagues at the lab checked out for home. Soon, there was just me left, staying overnight alone to monitor the patient. I have done this, as I say, many times before. It's the usual routine. I peered in for a moment through the window into the sleep room. I double-checked the signals, ensured the cameras were working. Satisfied with everything, I made myself comfortable in my chair and settled in for the long night ahead. I turned on my personal laptop and checked emails and so on. Can't use speakers or headphones on the chance that patients call out or make a noise during the night. Can't risk missing anything like that. I was reading something online when I first heard footsteps coming from the corridor. I didn't think anything of it. Probably one of the patients had woken up and had to use the restroom or something. I was immersed in the article I was reading, when suddenly everything seemed to stand still as the realization hit me. There were no other patients in the sleep lab tonight. Just me and Coma Guy. My head turned to the monitor instantly, in the dubious hope that maybe the patient had woken up. Nope, still on the bed, unresponsive, like a log. The footsteps were in the corridor, and they seemed to be going towards the sleep room. I swiveled in my chair and scrambled to the door in long, hurried steps, almost leaping to it. I opened it and peered out. There was no one in the corridor. Just to be safe, I checked the nearby rooms, including the vacant sleep rooms. All the doors leading to the sleep lab were locked. Only my staff security swipe card can open those. I was safe and sealed in. It had been my imagination. Sighing, I returned to the monitoring room. Another quick check that the recordings were in order, and I settled in to my laptop routine once again. With the computer fans humming away, the steady beep of the patient's heart rate, and nothing interesting online, I was on the verge of sleep. That almost unconscious phase is usually when you're nearly into stage 1 sleep, the first stage of non-rapid eye movement, NREM sleep, in case you're interested. The steady sound of the patient's heart rate is what had almost lulled me into a trance, and it's the heart rate that woke me up again with a start. The patient's heart rate had spontaneously increased, very fast. I looked up eagerly at the EEG signal. It had changed, gotten quicker, responsive to something. Was the patient waking up? I stared at the infrared camera image, which was blurry, so I got up and went to look in through the window. Nothing. There was no movement, no change in the patient's consciousness. But his breathing and heart rate had increased. His brain activity had changed within the coma. Was he experiencing hallucinations? I stared at the stationary figure on the bed for some time in the darkness. And then, something within the room moved. At first, I thought it was the shadow of the cabinet on the other side of the room, but the shadow was moving, creeping. A black mass, creeping slowly towards the bed. I blinked, trying to be sure of myself. It was so dark that sometimes the mind creates shapes of darkness and shadows. Illusions. No, it did seem to really be there. It was elongating now, as though this black thing had been on all fours and it was now standing up, to stand over the patient in his bed. Someone here to attack the patient? Or just someone mentally unstable who had somehow found a way in? Perhaps they had tailgated and slipped in behind a member of staff, as they had entered through the security-protected doors. "Hey!" I shouted, banging on the window. "Hey, who's there? You're not supposed to be in there!" The figure stood, unmoved. I went back to the door, through the corridor, and into the sleep room. I turned on the light. No one was there. There couldn't have been time to escape. If they had exited the sleep room, they would have run into me in the corridor. How odd. Most likely a trick of the darkness. Just to be certain, though, I checked underneath the bed, and in the ensuite bathroom, and in the cabinet for good measure. Everything was in order. I looked at the patient in bed. I was now standing over the bed in the same way I'd imagined the shadow had done. The patient's breathing had returned to his normal pace. I went back to the monitoring room, and I looked at the screen displaying the camera view. We were able to play back video without affecting live recording, so I rewound the recording a few minutes. There was nothing on there. No shadow. Everything was just like usual. Empty room with the patient in the bed. Nothing moving until I entered a few minutes later to check up. I sat down at my laptop again, not really able to concentrate anymore on the article I had been reading. I decided I needed some light relief. I went to YouTube and started watching some videos with the speakers turned off. I also found Reddit and discovered the silent video subreddit, a lifesaver for my work situation. Soon I was able to relax and was engrossed. I don't know how long passed in this way, an hour or so, I think. My eyes went back to the recording screen to make sure all was well. There was no EEG signal. It was flatlining. No heart signal, no breathing signal. My heart jumped into my throat. The patient was dead? And I'd missed it? I should have done something. What had happened? Oh God, what a fool I was, getting wrapped up in these videos. I looked at the camera feed and the patient was gone. The bed was empty. In the midst of the rush of adrenaline and confusion, and yes, also fear, though at that point I was more afraid of losing my job for negligence than anything else, I ran into the sleep room and turned on the light. The bed was tousled, as though the participant had just walked off. But that was impossible. The door had been closed, and the outer door had a security lock. Only those with a swipe card could get out. Feeling jittery, and trying to stave off the thoughts that I was going to get into a lot of trouble because I had let my guard down and let this patient walk off, I looked in the adjoining restroom. Nothing. Feeling stupid, I looked in the clothes cabinet. Nothing. I got on hands and knees, the carpet feeling rough under my palms, and looked under the bed. The patient was lying under the bed. I let out a sigh of relief. "Hello?" I said. No response. His eyes were closed. Without thinking about it, I shuffled sideways, halfway under the bed, and used one hand to slowly drag the man out. He was still unconscious. The wires were still attached to his head, but had been unplugged at the other end from the recording machine, so they trailed long, unattached wires like dreadlocks from his head. Heaving and panting, I somehow managed to get his dead weight back into the bed. I then set about plugging everything back into where it should be, and then covered him with a blanket again. I went back into the monitoring room. The signal was back and recording. The signal indicated that he was indeed still comatose. How had he managed to get out of the bed? Had he regained consciousness, unplugged the wires, and then hidden under the bed for some reason? Perhaps scared at the new surroundings, and then relapsed back into the coma while there? Highly unlikely, but the only solution to this conundrum that I could think of. This was all so strange. Only one way to find out. The video. Visual evidence. With that, we'd know exactly what happened. I clicked rewind on the video feed. The past hour was just a blank, dead screen. I felt winded. I sat down on my chair heavily. There must be some rational explanation for this. I went to the door that opened into the corridor and I closed it. It locks automatically, so only I can open it to get out with my card, just to be safe. I also thought it might be a good idea to check in with security services. They're around via phone access 24/7 for any lone workers at our facility. So it might be a good idea to tell them about the footsteps and all that, so they could send someone over. Before I had thought this was excessive. I don't like to cause a fuss over nothing. But now, well, perhaps someone was playing a prank on me. Now I just wanted someone here with me. Some reassurance. I picked up the office phone, and there was no dial tone. Never mind. I took my mobile from my pocket. No signal. Odd. I tried changing position, etc., but it was no use. I went into my email to message a colleague to see if I could ask them to ring security for me. This email could not be sent. Please check your connection and try again. The internet connection was definitely still there. I loaded a YouTube video, it was playing fine. I clicked on another video and a screaming erupted, startling me. To say I was annoyed is an understatement. Had someone put a screamer into one of these videos? I hit the mute button and it made no difference. My laptop was already on mute. I got to my feet, my head spinning with the unexpected screaming. It was unrelenting. I checked the EEG screen. Brainwave activity was as before, comatose, but his chin muscle signal was active. It meant that his mouth was moving. The infrared camera image was too grainy to tell, so I glanced at the window into his room. Indeed, his mouth was wide open, his chest muscles straining, he was screaming unrelentingly. But his brain signals, he was still in a coma. Before I could mentally process this, the patient sat upright in the bed. Here's the thing, there was no activity in his orbitofrontal, parietal or motor regions. Basically, the brain areas that should control his decision to sit up, plan the movement and signal his muscles to move, all were quiet, or inactive. By the look of the signal, his brain wasn't actually controlling his movements. What the hell? maybe there was something wrong with the signal. Maybe there was an error with the recording equipment. I ran into the door, which I'd closed just a few moments ago. It wouldn't open. I tried swiping my card. It wouldn't open. No beep, nothing. I went to switch on the light. Maybe I wasn't aiming the card at the sensor properly in the dark. The light wouldn't come on. The light was just completely out. There's a pane of frosted glass at the side of the door that opens from the monitoring room to the corridor. Perhaps I could smash it and squeeze through? I lifted the chair above my head and steadied myself, planting my feet firmly, and got ready to swing. Someone pushed me. Someone shoved me forcefully away from the door. I toppled over, the chair falling from my grip onto me in a confused, tumultuous movement where I couldn't tell where my head was in relation to my feet and the floor. I managed to entangle myself, pushing the chair off me, not thinking about the malicious force that had thrown me onto the floor, taking it all in stride, adrenaline making me incredulous, perhaps. Then the recording computer monitors went dark. The EEG signals and the camera feed screens both just... and they were gone. I was plunged into greater darkness. I ran to the window to look in at the patient. He was sitting upright in bed, still screaming. He had been screaming relentlessly throughout all of this. I stared at him and banged on the window, trying to get him to wake up. This wasn't a normal coma. Perhaps I could wake him up if I tried. I don't know what the hell this was. I was willing to throw all protocol out the window now. And then, someone closed the blind from the other room. I just stood there, staring at it. I didn't see a hand pull the blind down, but just the jerking movement of the dark blind being pulled to the bottom of the window pane. Someone else might have shouted out, asked who was there. I don't know why, but I just didn't. Maybe because I knew it would be no use. I never thought I would type this, but I knew then that this wasn't a human I was dealing with. I just felt suddenly drained. I went meekly, aimlessly, and sat down in my chair facing my laptop. It seems that electricity has gone from the building somehow, at least from the recording room. I can't check elsewhere. That should mean that the security doors automatically unlock, but they haven't. I'm trapped in here. The only reason I can still access the internet is because my laptop was fully charged. I've tried emailing many people, I've tried signing into Skype, I've tried messaging on Facebook, but I always get an error message. There is no signal on my phone. In desperation, I've tried to make a video out of all of this. I tried uploading it to YouTube and it seems to somehow still work, and yeah, so here you are, listening to me. The patient is in the room next door. He keeps screaming on and off. Is he in a coma or is he awake now? I don't know. I almost don't want to know. He now and then screams an actual word, a strange word, a few foreign syllables over and over. I don't know what he's saying. I have no idea what is going on. There is no explanation for what has happened, not that I can tell. I have a feeling that this, whatever this is, has its sights set on the patient alone and just wants me to keep out of its way. I have no choice but to oblige. I'm out of options. I just need to make it through the rest of this night. It seems to stretch out before me, never ending. When morning comes, if I make it out of here alive, I'm going to go and visit my brother. And I'm going to apologize to him.